The rain hammered against my face, like 1,000 frozen needles, as I stood barefoot on the porch steps. My arthritic fingers clawing at the locked mahogany door that had welcomed me home for 43 years. "You're not welcome here anymore, Margaret. This is my house now. My children don't need a bitter old woman poisoning their minds with your outdated values." My hand froze mid-knock, trembling against the wood grain I had polished every Sunday morning since 1981. Through the frosted glass panel, I could see Victoria's silhouette turn away, her designer heels clicking across the marble foyer my late husband Thomas had installed the year our son was born. "Before you think I'm just another foolish elderly woman, let me ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you handed them everything, only to watch them lock you out of your own life? If this sounds familiar, or if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, I need you here with me tonight. Hit that like button if you're listening, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know my voice is reaching people who understand what it means to be thrown away like yesterday's newspaper. My name is Margaret Eleanor Thornhill. I'm 68 years old, and until 3 hours ago, I believed my daughter-in-law Victoria was the daughter I never had. I believed my son Daniel loved me enough to protect me. I believed the residence my husband built with his bare hands would shelter me until my final breath. I was wrong about everything. The storm that night wasn't just meteorological. It was the culmination of 18 months of subtle cruelty, whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, and the slow, calculated theft of my identity. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how a respected retired school teacher ended up hypothermic on her own doorstep, you need to understand how Victoria entered our lives like a beautiful viper, and how I, in my desperate loneliness after Thomas died, welcomed her with open arms. Thomas passed suddenly 2 years ago. Massive cardiac arrest while trimming the rose bushes I had planted on our 25th anniversary. He was 69, strong as an ox, never sick a day in his life. One moment he was laughing about our grandson's baseball game. The next he was gone. Daniel found him face down in the garden, pruning shears still clutched in his right hand. The grief nearly destroyed me. For 6 months, I barely left my bedroom. Daniel would visit twice weekly, bringing groceries, sitting silently beside me, while I stared at Thomas's empty chair. My son was my lifeline during those dark months, and when he introduced me to Victoria 8 months after the funeral, I saw her as a gift from God, a vibrant, caring woman who would bring light back into my son's eyes. Victoria was 34, 15 years younger than Daniel, with honey blonde hair and a smile that could melt glaciers. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, drove a white Mercedes, and spoke about family values with such passion that I cried the first time she called me Mom. She said her own mother had passed when she was 19, and she'd been searching for that maternal connection ever since. I believed every word. Within 3 months they were engaged. Within 6, married in our garden, under the oak tree where Thomas proposed to me in 1976. I paid for everything: the dress, the reception, the honeymoon to Tuscany. Victoria cried and thanked me, saying she'd never had anyone treat her like family before. The first crack appeared 2 weeks after they returned from Italy, but I was too blind to see it then. What I didn't know was that Victoria had been studying me since the day they met, cataloging my routines, my relationships, my assets, preparing for the moment she could erase me completely. Victoria moved into my residence with the efficiency of a military operation, though at the time I mistook her assertiveness for enthusiasm. "Mom, you shouldn't be climbing ladders at your age. Let me handle the curtains." "Mom, this kitchen layout is so inefficient. What if we rearranged things to make your life easier?" "Mom, these old photographs are cluttering the mantel. Let's create a beautiful digital album instead." Each suggestion felt like care. Each change felt like progress. I was so grateful to have another woman in the residence after 2 years of echoing silence that I didn't notice how my belongings were slowly disappearing, how my routines were being rewritten, how my voice in my own dwelling was growing quieter. Daniel seemed happier than I'd seen him since his father's passing. He'd started his own consulting firm 3 years earlier, and Victoria supported him beautifully, hosting clients, managing his schedule, presenting the image of the perfect corporate wife. They talked about giving me grandchildren, about building a legacy, about honoring Thomas's memory by keeping the family strong. I started sleeping better. The grief began lifting like morning fog. I even joined my church's volunteer committee again, something I hadn't had energy for since Thomas died. "You're glowing, Margaret," my friend Patricia said one Sunday after service. "Victoria must be wonderful for you." "She's a blessing," I replied, meaning every word. "She's helping me live again." What I didn't see were the private conversations between Victoria and Daniel behind their closed bedroom door. The way she'd massage his shoulders while whispering about financial security and protecting our future. The documents she'd been researching at the county clerk's office, studying property laws and inheritance statutes, with the focus of a doctoral candidate. The second crack appeared during Thanksgiving, 6 months after their wedding. We were hosting Daniel's childhood friends and their families, something Thomas and I had done every year since Daniel was born. I'd spent 3 days preparing his favorite dishes: herb roasted turkey, my grandmother's stuffing recipe, homemade cranberry sauce with orange zest. The dining room table was set with our wedding china, the good crystal Thomas's mother had given us, candles flickering in the silver holders we'd received as a wedding gift. Victoria emerged from upstairs in a stunning burgundy dress. Just as guests began arriving, she looked radiant, playing hostess with practiced grace, accepting compliments about the meal I'd spent 72 hours preparing. "Victoria, this turkey is incredible," Daniel's college roommate Marcus said, raising his wine glass. "You're a culinary genius." "Oh, it's nothing," Victoria demurred, touching Daniel's arm. "Just a little recipe I picked up. I'm so glad everyone's enjoying it." I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, dish towel in my trembling hands, waiting for her to correct him, waiting for Daniel to acknowledge the truth. Neither spoke. "Actually, I prepared," I began. "Mom, could you grab more ice from the garage?" Victoria interrupted smoothly, her smile never faltering. "We're running low." I retreated to the garage like a scolded child, my throat tight with unshed tears. Through the door I heard laughter, clinking glasses, Victoria's melodious voice weaving stories about our residence and our traditions. When I returned with the ice bucket, the conversation had moved on. Nobody noticed I'd been gone. That night, after everyone left and Daniel drove Victoria to her sister's dwelling for an overnight visit, I sat alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by dirty dishes, staring at the remains of a feast I'd cooked but received no credit for creating. The dwelling felt different, somehow. Colder, less mine. I told myself I was being sensitive, that Victoria had simply forgotten to mention my contribution in the excitement of hosting. I told myself that family meant sacrifice, that a good mother-in-law supported her son's happiness above her own ego. I told myself many lies that autumn. But the foundation was cracking, and soon the entire structure would collapse, burying me beneath the rubble of my own naive trust. January brought ice storms and a conversation that would change everything, though I didn't understand its significance until much later. Daniel appeared at my bedroom door one Tuesday evening, holding a manila folder and wearing the expression he'd had as a child when asking permission for something he knew was questionable. "Mom, can we talk about something important?" I set down my book, a mystery novel Patricia had recommended, and patted the bed beside me. "Of course, sweetheart. What's troubling you?" He sat, but didn't meet my eyes. The folder remained closed on his lap, his thumb worrying the corner. "Victoria and I have been thinking about the future, about security, about making sure everyone's protected if something unexpected happens." My chest tightened. "Daniel, I'm healthy. Dr. Morrison says my heart is strong. My blood work is excellent for my age." "It's not about that," he interrupted gently. "It's about being smart. Dad didn't have everything in order when he passed, and you remember how complicated the probate process was. We just want to make sure that doesn't happen again." This was true. Thomas had died without updating his will since Daniel was a teenager. Everything had eventually transferred to me, but the legal fees and delays had been exhausting during an already devastating time. "What are you suggesting?" I asked carefully. "A trust," Daniel said. Finally opening the folder, we'd put the property and primary assets into a family trust with you, me, and Victoria as co-trustees. Everything would still be yours, Mom. You'd still live here, still make all the decisions. But if something happened to you, the transition would be seamless. No probate, no delays, no government taking a chunk in taxes. He spread the documents across my quilt, pages dense with legal terminology, highlighted sections, sticky notes marking signature lines. Victoria's boss recommended an estate attorney, Daniel continued. He's excellent, very experienced. He said this is the smartest way to protect generational wealth, especially with property values in this neighborhood, increasing 15% annually. I scanned the papers, struggling to focus on the dense paragraphs. My reading glasses were downstairs, and the lamp beside my bed cast inadequate light. This seems complicated, Daniel. Can I have my own attorney review it? Something flickered across his face. Annoyance? Frustration? But disappeared so quickly, I thought I'd imagined it. Of course, he said smoothly. But Mom, attorneys are expensive. This guy did it as a favor because of Victoria's connection. If you bring in another lawyer, we'll have to pay their fees to review work that's already been done by a top professional. It seems wasteful, doesn't it? Dad always taught us to be financially responsible. The invocation of Thomas's values stung. My husband had been frugal, yes, but never foolish. He would have insisted on independent counsel for something this significant. But I was tired. The winter darkness was triggering my seasonal depression. I missed Thomas with an ache that never fully subsided. And Daniel was my son. My only child, the boy I'd rocked through nightmares and driven to baseball practice and helped with college applications. He wouldn't hurt me. Let me read through everything carefully, I said finally. I'll give you an answer by the end of the week. Relief flooded Daniel's features. He kissed my forehead, gathered the papers, and left them on my nightstand. Take your time, Mom. We love you. We just want to protect you. After he left, I tried reading the documents, but the legal language swam before my eyes. Words like irrevocable, successor trustee, and incapacity determination seemed designed to confuse rather than clarify. I set them aside, intending to ask Patricia's son, an attorney in Hartford, to explain them. But the next morning, Victoria arrived with fresh croissants and coffee, chattering about a sale at my favorite boutique, and somehow, the documents got buried under magazines on my nightstand. I forgot about them for 3 weeks. By the time I remembered, I had already signed them during a moment I still can't fully recall, and my fate was sealed. February 14th arrived with unexpected warmth, an early thaw that turned the frozen ground to mud and filled the air with false promises of spring. Victoria knocked on my bedroom door at 9 in the morning, carrying a tray with heart-shaped pancakes, fresh strawberries, and a small vase containing a single red rose. "Happy Valentine's Day, Mom," she said, her smile radiant. "I know this day must be hard without Dad, so I wanted to do something special." The gesture broke something inside me. I started crying, ugly gasping sobs that embarrassed me even as they poured out. Victoria set down the tray and held me, stroking my hair, making soothing sounds like I was a child. "I miss him so much," I choked out. "Some days I can barely breathe." "I know," she whispered. "But you're not alone anymore. You have us. You have family who loves you." After I composed myself, we ate breakfast together. Victoria talked about her childhood, about losing her mother to cancer, about how holidays were the hardest. I felt connected to her in a way I hadn't since my own mother passed 20 years earlier. "Mom, I hate to bring up business on a day like this," Victoria said, dabbing her lips with a napkin, "but Daniel's been worried sick about those trust documents. The attorney called yesterday saying the filing deadline is approaching, and if we miss it, we'll have to start the entire process over with new fees." I'd completely forgotten. "Oh goodness. I meant to have Patricia's son review them." "Of course." "Absolutely," Victoria interrupted. "But he's in Hartford, right? That's a 2-hour drive each way, and honestly, Mom, I looked over the documents myself. They're completely standard. My boss has the exact same setup for his mother. It's really just paperwork to make everything official." She pulled the folder from her designer handbag, along with a notary stamp and identification. "I'm a certified notary through my company," she explained. "I can witness your signature right here, right now, and we can file everything today. Then it's done. and you don't have to worry about it anymore. Something in my gut twisted, a warning I should have heeded, but I was emotionally raw, grateful for her kindness, and frankly exhausted by legal complications. Thomas had always handled these matters. Making decisions alone felt overwhelming. "Where do I sign?" I asked. Victoria flipped through the pages with practiced efficiency, pointing to highlighted lines. "Here, here, and initial here. And here's your full legal name typed out. Just sign above it." I signed 6 times. My hand shook slightly, whether from arthritis or intuition. "I'll never know." "Perfect," Victoria said, pressing her notary stamp beside each signature with a satisfying thump. "All done. See? Painless." She gathered the documents quickly, sliding them back into the folder. "I'll drop these at the attorney's office this afternoon. You just relax and enjoy your day." After she left, I sat in the lingering warmth of her kindness, telling myself I'd done the right thing, that I was being a good mother by trusting my family, that Thomas would be proud of me for handling adult responsibilities despite my grief. I didn't know that the documents I'd signed weren't just a trust arrangement. Hidden in the dense legal paragraphs were clauses granting Victoria power of attorney, designating her as primary decision-maker in case of my incapacity, defined broadly enough to include anything from dementia to a simple hospital stay, and establishing a mechanism by which I could be removed from my own dwelling if 2 trustees, Daniel and Victoria, deemed it necessary for my welfare. I didn't know that Victoria's boss's attorney was actually her former college boyfriend, now a disbarred lawyer working from a strip mall office, willing to draft questionable documents for cash. I didn't know that I had just signed away my autonomy, my security, and my dwelling. I didn't know that the trap had already closed around me, and the real nightmare was about to begin. The changes started subtly, like a photograph fading so gradually you don't notice until the colors have completely washed away. March brought rain and small alterations to my daily routine. Victoria suggested I stop driving to my volunteer work at the church. The roads were dangerous. My reflexes weren't what they used to be. Wouldn't it be safer if she drove me? I agreed, grateful for the company. Then she mentioned that my weekly bridge game with Patricia and the other ladies might be too exhausting. "You always come back so tired, Mom. Maybe every other week instead?" I reduced my social calendar, not wanting to seem ungrateful. My doctor's appointments began including Victoria. "I want to make sure I understand your health situation," she explained, "in case of emergency." "Doctor." Morrison seemed uncomfortable with her presence, but said nothing when Victoria asked detailed questions about my medications, my cognitive function, my ability to live independently. "Everything's fine," Dr. Morrison told me after the examination. "You're healthy, Margaret, remarkably so." But Victoria frowned at the doctor. "What about the memory issues she mentioned? The confusion about dates?" I stared at her. "I never said." "Mom, you told me last week you couldn't remember what day your appointment was," Victoria said gently, touching my arm. "It's okay. It happens. Dr. Morrison, should we be concerned about early cognitive decline?" The doctor looked between us, clearly uncertain. "Mrs. Thornhill, are you experiencing memory problems?" "No," I said firmly. "I'm not." Victoria's smile never wavered, but her eyes held something cold. "Of course, doctor. I'm probably just being overprotective. New daughter-in-law syndrome, right?" The doctor laughed uncomfortably and ended the appointment. In the parking lot, Victoria's demeanor shifted. "Mom, I'm worried about you. You're becoming defensive about your health. That's often the first sign of cognitive issues, patients who deny their symptoms." "I don't have symptoms," I said, my voice rising. "You're putting words in my mouth." "Okay," Victoria said softly, the way you'd speak to a confused child. "Okay, Mom, let's not argue. I'm just trying to help." That night, I heard them talking in the kitchen. I'd come downstairs for water and froze on the staircase, hidden in shadows. "She's getting worse," Victoria said. "Did you see how she snapped at me in the parking lot? Completely irrational." "Mom's always been independent," Daniel replied, sounding uncertain. "Maybe we're pushing too hard." "Daniel, your mother is 68 years old, living alone in a property far too large for her to maintain. What happens when she falls? When she forgets to turn off the stove, when she wanders outside in winter and gets hypothermia. She's not senile, Victoria. Not yet, Victoria said, and I heard the clink of wine glasses. But we need to be prepared. That's why we set up the trust, remember? So we can protect her when the time comes. When the time comes, Daniel echoed quietly. I crept back upstairs, my heart hammering. They were planning something. Preparing for a future where I was helpless, dependent, mentally incompetent. But I wasn't any of those things. I was sharp, capable, healthy. Wasn't I? Doubt crept in like poison. Maybe I was forgetting things. Maybe the grief had damaged me more than I realized. Maybe I was becoming a burden, and they were too kind to say it directly. I started second-guessing myself. When I couldn't find my reading glasses, I wondered if I was losing my memory instead of considering that someone might have moved them. When I felt tired after Victoria's visits, I attributed it to age rather than stress. The gaslighting was working. By April, I was questioning my own reality, jumping at shadows, wondering if the trap I sensed closing around me was real, or just the paranoid delusions of an aging woman who'd read too many mystery novels. The truth was so much worse than paranoia, and I was about to discover exactly how deep Victoria's deception ran. May 17th changed everything. I woke at 2 in the morning, needing the bathroom, a consequence of the diuretic Dr. Morrison had prescribed for my blood pressure. The dwelling was dark and silent, Daniel and Victoria asleep in the guest room they'd been using more frequently. To keep you company, Mom, so you're not alone in this big property. Returning to my bedroom, I noticed light seeping from beneath the study door. Thomas's old office, the room where he'd managed our finances and planned our retirement. Victoria had claimed it as her workspace 3 months earlier, filling it with her laptop, filing cabinets, and stacks of pharmaceutical samples. The door was slightly ajar. Through the gap I could see Victoria hunched over the desk, surrounded by papers, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her computer screen. I should have knocked, should have announced myself, but something in her posture, furtive, intense, guilty, made me stay silent. I watched her photocopy documents from a file labeled Thornhill Estate, then slip them into a manila envelope addressed to Riverside Senior Living Community. She pulled up a website on her laptop, and even from the doorway, I could read the header, Memory Care Facilities, Connecticut. My blood turned to ice. Victoria began typing an email. Per a phone conversation, I'm attaching medical documentation supporting my mother-in-law's cognitive decline. As co-trustee with power of attorney, I'm authorized to make placement decisions. Please send intake paperwork and cost estimates for your secured memory unit. Timeline, 60-90 days. I must have made a sound, a gasp, a whimper, because Victoria's head snapped up, her eyes meeting mine through the door gap. For 3 seconds, we stared at each other. Then her expression transformed from shock to something calculating, and she smiled. Mom, you startled me. What are you doing up? I pushed the door open, my legs shaking. What is this? Why are you researching memory care facilities? Victoria stood, smoothing her silk robe. Because I love you, and I'm trying to plan for your future. You're not getting any younger, and we need to be prepared. I don't need memory care, I said, my voice cracking. There's nothing wrong with my mind. Mom, sit down. Victoria guided me to the leather chair, Thomas's chair, with gentle pressure on my shoulders. We need to have an honest conversation. You've been declining for months, forgetting appointments, losing things, becoming confused and agitated. Daniel and I have been documenting everything. Documenting? The word felt like a slap. Victoria pulled a thick binder from her desk drawer. Incident reports. March 3rd. You forgot to turn off the stove, nearly starting a fire. March 17th. You got lost driving to Patricia's residence, a route you've taken for 30 years. April 2nd. You accused me of stealing your jewelry, then found it exactly where you'd left it. She flipped through pages of typed notes, dates, times, detailed descriptions of events I couldn't remember because they'd never happened. This is insane, I whispered. You're making this up. Am I? Victoria's voice remained calm, almost pitying. Mom, denial is common with dementia patients, but we have a legal and moral obligation to keep you safe. The trust documents you signed give Daniel and me authority to make healthcare decisions. If you're unable to do so yourself, I never agreed to be put in a facility. You don't have to agree, Victoria said softly. That's the point of the trust. Two trustees can override the third if they determine you lack capacity. And Mom, Daniel agrees with me. He's seen the decline too. He's just been too heartbroken to accept it. The room tilted. My son, my baby boy, had been participating in this, had been documenting false evidence to declare me incompetent. Why? I asked, tears streaming down my face. Why are you doing this? Victoria's mask finally slipped. Her smile turned sharp, predatory. Because this property is worth $2.3 million, Margaret. Because your investment portfolio is worth another $800,000. Because I didn't marry a middle-aged consultant to struggle financially while his senile mother lives in luxury. She leaned close, her breath warm against my ear. And because you're too trusting, too weak, and too stupid to stop me. I ran. I fled to my bedroom and locked the door, my hands shaking so violently I could barely turn the key. Behind me, Victoria's footsteps followed leisurely, unhurried. Mom, you're being irrational, she called through the door. This is exactly the kind of behavior we've been documenting. Paranoid delusions, emotional instability. You're proving my point. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, intending to call Patricia, the police. Anyone. But the screen was dead. I distinctly remembered charging it before bed. Looking for this. Victoria's voice came from right outside my door. I took the liberty of removing your charger earlier. We can't have you making confused phone calls in the middle of the night, worrying people unnecessarily. I searched frantically for the landline phone that used to sit on my dresser. Gone. When had that disappeared? Daniel, I screamed toward their bedroom. Daniel, please. You have to hear what she's saying. Silence. Either he was sleeping through my cries, or he was awake and choosing not to respond. I didn't know which possibility was more terrifying. I spent the rest of the night, barricaded in my room, pushing my dresser against the door, sitting with my back against it like a prisoner in my own dwelling. Every creak of the property sent adrenaline spiking through my system. I watched the sun rise through my window, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed obscene given the nightmare I was living. At 7 o'clock, I heard movement in the hallway, then Daniel's voice, muffled through the door. Mom, can you open up? Victoria says you had an episode last night. And episode? I laughed, the sound harsh and broken. Daniel, she admitted everything. She's trying to put me in a facility to steal my property. Your father's property. Mom, Victoria would never. She told me. She said I was too weak and stupid to stop her. Silence. Then Mom, that doesn't sound like Victoria. Are you sure that's what she said? Or is this like the time you thought someone broke in but you'd just forgotten you'd rearranged the living room? I froze. I never rearranged the living room. Yes, you did. In April. Don't you remember? You moved all the furniture around, then the next morning you panicked because everything was different. This was a lie. I'd never moved furniture, but Daniel said it with such certainty, such concern, that for a moment I questioned myself again. Daniel, please, I begged. Get me a phone. Let me call Patricia. Let me talk to someone outside this property. Of course, he said gently. But first, can you open the door? We need to make sure you're okay. Victoria's worried you might hurt yourself. I pulled the dresser away and unlocked the door. Daniel stood there, looking exhausted, his hair disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed. Behind him, Victoria watched with an expression of tender concern that made my skin crawl. I'm calling Patricia, I said firmly, reaching for Daniel's phone in his pocket. He stepped back. Mom, it's 7 in the morning. Let's have breakfast first. Let you calm down, and then we can make calls. Okay? No, I want to call her now. Margaret, Victoria said softly. You're not well. Can't you see that? You're standing here in your nightgown. Your hair's a mess. You're making wild accusations. This is what we've been trying to tell you. You need help. Get out of my dwelling, I said, my voice shaking. Both of you, get out right now. Victoria exchanged a glance with Daniel. Mom, this is our property too, remember? The trust? You can't just kick us out. Watch me. I pushed past them toward the stairs, intending to call the police from a neighbor's dwelling if necessary. That's when Victoria made her move. Daniel, she's becoming violent. We need to implement the safety protocol. I reached the top of the stairs, and Victoria pushed me. I didn't fall far, maybe 5 steps before I caught myself on the railing, my shoulder slamming into the wall with enough force to knock the breath from my lungs. Pain exploded through my left side, bright and sharp. But I didn't tumble to the bottom, didn't break my neck, didn't give them the tragedy they needed. Oh my God, Mom! Daniel rushed down, his face white with shock. Are you okay? What happened? I looked up at Victoria, still standing at the top of the stairs, her expression perfectly calibrated to show horror and concern. But her eyes held disappointment. She pushed me, I gasped, clutching my shoulder. Daniel, she pushed me down the stairs. That's absurd, Victoria said, descending slowly. Margaret, you lost your balance. I tried to grab you, but you pulled away. Daniel, you saw it. Daniel looked between us, confusion and fear warring on his face. I saw Mom pull away from you. I didn't see what happened before that. She pushed me, I repeated, but even to my own ears it sounded weak, desperate. The word of a hysterical old woman against a calm, composed younger one. Victoria knelt beside me, her hand on my uninjured shoulder. We need to get you to the hospital. You might have broken something. Daniel, call an ambulance. No, I said sharply. No hospitals. I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. My shoulder was already swelling, the pain radiating down my arm in sickening waves. I couldn't lift it without gasping. Mom, you need to be examined, Daniel insisted, already dialing. The ambulance arrived within 15 minutes. 2 paramedics, a young woman with kind eyes and an older man with a gray beard, assessed me with professional efficiency. Possible shoulder dislocation, the woman said. We should transport. I don't want to go, I told her quietly. Please, I just want to stay in my dwelling. She looked at me carefully, then at Victoria and Daniel hovering nearby. Something in her expression shifted. A flicker of understanding or suspicion. Ma'am, are you safe here? Is there anyone you'd like us to call? Victoria stepped forward before I could answer. I'm her daughter-in-law. We've been caring for her since her husband passed. She's been having some cognitive issues lately. Confusion, paranoia. We're actually in the process of arranging professional care. The paramedic's expression closed off. I watched her reclassify me in real time, from potential abuse victim to elderly patient with dementia. I see. Well, we still recommend hospital evaluation. Of course, Victoria said smoothly. We'll take her ourselves. Thank you so much for coming. After the paramedics left, Victoria's mask dropped completely. That was stupid, Margaret. If you'd fallen properly, this would all be over. Now we have to do this the hard way. Victoria, what are you? Daniel began. Shut up, Daniel, she snapped, and I watched my son flinch. Your mother just tried to run to the neighbors. She's becoming a liability. We need to accelerate the timeline. Timeline for what? I asked, though I already knew. Victoria smiled, cold and beautiful. For your involuntary psychiatric commitment. I've been documenting your decline for months. The incident reports, the doctor's concerns about your memory, and now this, a clear mental health crisis, resulting in injury. With Daniel's testimony supporting mine, we can have you placed in a secured facility by the end of the week. You can't do that, I whispered. We can, Victoria corrected. We're your trustees. We have power of attorney, and Connecticut law allows involuntary commitment. If 2 qualified individuals attest that you're a danger to yourself or others. You just gave us the evidence we needed. She turned to Daniel. Get her cleaned up and into the car. We're taking her to St. Michael's psychiatric unit for evaluation. By the time they release her, if they release her, we'll have the property sold and the money transferred. Daniel looked at me, his eyes filled with tears. Mom, I'm sorry, but Victoria's right. You need help. Dad would want us to take care of you. My son, My baby believed her completely. I had no allies, no phone, no escape. I was trapped. They didn't take me to the hospital that day. Instead, Victoria made a phone call to someone she referred to as Dr. Brennan, speaking in low tones about emergency evaluation and safety concerns. An appointment was scheduled for the following afternoon at a private psychiatric facility I'd never heard of. I spent the rest of that day locked in my bedroom. They'd removed the interior lock, but Victoria stationed herself in the hallway for my safety. I heard her out there, scrolling through her phone, occasionally speaking to Daniel in tones too quiet to decipher. My shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat. I couldn't lift my arm above waist height, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the psychological torture of knowing my own son had chosen his wife over his mother, greed over love, comfort over truth. Night fell. The weather forecast had predicted severe thunderstorms, and by 8 o'clock, I could hear wind beginning to howl around the property's corners. Rain started as a whisper, then built to a roar. At 9:30, Daniel knocked on my door. "Mom, Victoria and I are going to drive into town to pick up your prescription. Dr. Brennan called in something to help you sleep before tomorrow's appointment. We'll be back in an hour." I didn't respond. I heard their footsteps descending the stairs, the garage door opening, Daniel's car starting, then silence, except for the storm. I waited 10 minutes to be sure they were really gone. Then I moved. My plan was simple: get to Patricia's dwelling 3 blocks away, call the police, expose everything before they could commit me. I threw on clothes with my one functioning arm, grabbed my purse from the closet where Victoria had organized it, and crept downstairs. The front door was locked. Not just the handle lock, the deadbolt too, and it required a key from the inside. A key I didn't have. I tried the back door. Same situation. The garage, also locked, and the automatic opener had been disabled. Every exit was sealed. They'd turned my dwelling into a prison while I slept. Panic rising, I grabbed a chair from the dining room and threw it at the kitchen window. The glass shattered outward into the storm, rain immediately pouring through the opening. I used the chair to clear the remaining shards, then began climbing through, my injured shoulder screaming in agony. I was halfway out when I heard the garage door opening. They'd returned early. I dropped to the ground outside, landing in mud and broken glass, and ran. The storm was biblical, wind that nearly knocked me over, rain like needles, lightning that turned the world white every few seconds. I was barefoot, having forgotten shoes in my panic, and within seconds I was soaked through, shivering violently. Behind me, I heard Victoria's voice cutting through the storm. "Margaret, come back inside. You'll die out here." I reached the front porch, my own front porch, and pounded on the door with my good hand. "Let me in. This is my dwelling. Let me in." The porch light flicked on. Through the frosted glass panel, I saw Victoria's silhouette approach. The door opened a crack. "You're not welcome here anymore, Margaret. This is my property now. My children don't need a bitter old woman poisoning their minds with your outdated values." "Victoria, please," I begged, my teeth chattering. "I'm freezing. I'm hurt. Please." She smiled. "You should have thought of that before you tried to run. Goodbye, Margaret. I hope the storm isn't too unpleasant." The door slammed. The lock clicked. I stood there in the freezing rain, my arthritic fingers clawing at the wood, hypothermia beginning to set in. My vision blurred, my legs weakened. This was how I would die, locked out of my own dwelling by the woman I'd welcomed as a daughter, while my son did nothing to save me. I sank to my knees on the porch steps, too cold to cry, too exhausted to fight anymore. That's when I heard a car approaching through the storm. Headlights swept across the driveway. A door opened, and a voice I hadn't heard in 18 months said, "Mrs. Thornhill, dear God, what's happened to you?" Marcus Chen, Daniel's college roommate, the friend who'd complimented Victoria's turkey at Thanksgiving, stood in the rain holding an umbrella, his face a mask of horror. Marcus, I could barely form the word through my shaking. He was beside me in seconds, draping his coat over my shoulders. "We need to get you warm. Can you walk?" "She locked me out," I whispered. "My own dwelling, she locked me out." Marcus's jaw tightened. He helped me to my feet, supporting my weight as we moved toward his car, but before we reached it, the front door opened again. Victoria stood there, backlit by the foyer chandelier, looking like an angel. "Marcus, thank God you're here." Margaret had another episode. She broke the kitchen window and ran outside. "We've been searching everywhere for her." "Is that so?" Marcus's voice was ice. "Then why did I just watch you refuse to let her inside?" Victoria's expression didn't falter. She was hysterical, violent. "I was afraid she'd hurt herself, or Daniel. I was about to call the police for a welfare check when you arrived." "You're lying," I said, my voice stronger now. "Marcus, she's been planning this for months. She's trying to have me committed so she can steal my property. She pushed me down the stairs this morning. She's been documenting false evidence of dementia. Mom, stop." Daniel appeared behind Victoria, his face anguished. "Marcus, I'm sorry you have to see this. Mom's been declining rapidly. We're taking her for psychiatric evaluation tomorrow." Marcus looked at me. Really looked at me. At my injured shoulder, my bare feet bleeding from broken glass, my hypothermic shivering. Then he looked at Daniel and Victoria, dry and comfortable in the warm dwelling. "Daniel," Marcus said slowly, "I need you to think very carefully about what's happening here. Your mother is injured, hypothermic, and locked out of her own dwelling during a severe storm. Does that seem like appropriate care for someone you claim to love?" "It's complicated," Daniel began. "It's not complicated," Marcus interrupted. "It's elder abuse, and I'm a mandatory reporter." The words hung in the air like a bomb. Victoria's mask finally cracked, fury flashing across her features before she controlled it. "Marcus, you're misunderstanding the situation," she said carefully. "Margaret has been exhibiting increasingly dangerous behavior. We've been trying to help her, but she's resistant to care. Tonight she became violent, breaking windows, threatening us. We were protecting ourselves. By locking a 68-year-old woman outside in a thunderstorm." Marcus pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police. And an ambulance." "Marcus, please," Daniel stepped forward. "Don't do this. She's my mother. I'm handling it." "You're not handling it, Daniel. You're enabling abuse." Marcus dialed, keeping his eyes on them. "Yes, I need police and EMS at 847 Meadowbrook Lane. I have an elderly woman suffering from hypothermia and suspected elder abuse. Yes, I'll stay on the line." Victoria's expression transformed into something ugly. "You self-righteous piece of—" "Victoria, shut up," Daniel said suddenly, his voice breaking. "Just shut up." He looked at me then. Really looked at me, and I saw the moment the spell broke. The moment he saw not the incompetent, declining mother Victoria had convinced him I was, but the woman who'd raised him, who'd sacrificed everything for him, who'd loved him unconditionally his entire life. "Mom," he whispered, "what have I done?" "You chose her," I said simply. "Over me, over your father's memory, over everything we built together." He started crying, deep, wrenching sobs. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," she said. She made it sound like we were protecting you, like this was love. "It was never love," I said. "It was greed." Sirens approached in the distance. Victoria grabbed her purse from the hall table, her movements sharp and angry. "I'm not staying for this circus." "Daniel, are you coming?" My son looked at his wife, then at me. For a moment, I thought he might still choose her. Then he said, "No. I'm staying with my mother." Victoria's face contorted with rage. "You're making a mistake. I have evidence. I have evidence. I'll destroy both of you." "Try it," Marcus said coldly. "I'm an attorney, Victoria, and I've been recording this entire conversation." He held up his phone, the voice memo app clearly visible. Victoria's face went white. The police arrived 30 seconds later. The next 72 hours were a blur of hospital rooms, police interviews, and legal proceedings that would have overwhelmed me if Marcus hadn't guided me through every step. The emergency room doctors treated me for moderate hypothermia, a dislocated shoulder, and multiple lacerations on my feet. They also documented extensive bruising consistent with being pushed downstairs, evidence that directly contradicted Victoria's claim that I'd simply lost my balance. Detective Sarah Walsh from the Elder Abuse Unit took my statement while I was still in the hospital. She was in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a manner that suggested she'd seen every variation of family cruelty imaginable. "Mrs. Thornhill, I need you to tell me everything from the beginning," she said gently. "And I mean everything, even the parts that seem small or embarrassing." So I did. I told her about the trust documents, the false medical reports, the isolation from friends, the gaslighting, the incident reports Victoria had fabricated. I told her about the midnight discovery in Thomas's study, about Victoria's admission of her true intentions, about being pushed down the stairs and locked out in the storm. Detective Walsh took notes, her expression growing darker with each revelation. "Do you still have access to any of these documents?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Victoria controlled everything." "That's okay. We'll get them." She paused. "Mrs. Thornhill, I need to tell you something. This isn't the first time we've investigated Victoria Brennan. That's her maiden name. She was married once before, to a widower in Massachusetts. His family filed a similar complaint about financial exploitation and attempted guardianship fraud. The case was dropped when the man died suddenly of a heart attack before trial." The room tilted. "You think she killed him?" "We couldn't prove it, but the pattern is identical. Target wealthy, grieving widowers, or their surviving parents, establish trust, isolate them from support systems, fabricate evidence of incompetence, seize assets." Detective Walsh leaned forward. "You're lucky Marcus Chen showed up when he did. Victoria's previous victim wasn't so fortunate." Marcus, who'd been waiting outside, had his own story to tell. He'd grown suspicious months ago, when Daniel stopped returning his calls, when Victoria made excuses for why they couldn't attend social events, when he'd driven past my dwelling and seen me looking lost and frightened in the front window. "I'm a family law attorney," Marcus explained. "I see elder abuse cases regularly. The isolation, the sudden changes in routine, the way Victoria answered questions for you at Thanksgiving. It all set off alarm bells. I've been documenting everything since January, just in case." His documentation, combined with Detective Walsh's investigation, painted a damning picture. The attorney who drafted my trust documents was indeed disbarred and had been paid in cash. The incident reports Victoria had created were entirely fabricated. I'd never forgotten to turn off the stove, never gotten lost, never accused anyone of theft. Dr. Morrison confirmed that Victoria had lied about my expressing memory concerns. Most damning of all was Marcus's recording from the night of the storm. Victoria's own words, "This is my property now. You should have thought of that before you tried to run," combined with evidence that she'd deliberately locked me out during life-threatening weather, constituted both elder abuse and attempted manslaughter. Daniel cooperated fully with the investigation, providing his own testimony about Victoria's manipulation. "She told me Mom was declining," he said during his interview, his voice hollow. "She'd show me these reports, these incidents, and I believed her because I trusted my wife. I thought I was protecting my mother by helping Victoria. I didn't realize I was destroying her." The trust documents were invalidated. A judge ruled they'd been obtained through fraud and undue influence. Power of attorney was revoked. The property, the assets, everything reverted to my sole control. Victoria was arrested on charges of elder abuse, fraud, attempted theft, and assault. Her bail was set at $500,000, money she didn't have, since she'd spent her own resources planning to steal mine. She sat in county jail while I recovered in Patricia's guest room, too afraid to return to my own dwelling yet. But the legal victory, satisfying as it was, didn't heal the deepest wound. My son had betrayed me, and I didn't know if I could ever forgive him. 6 months have passed since that terrible night in the storm. Victoria's trial concluded last week. She was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 8 years in prison, with restitution ordered for the emotional distress and medical expenses she'd caused. The judge's words still echo in my mind. "You preyed upon a grieving widow with calculated cruelty. You weaponized trust and family bonds for financial gain. This court finds your actions reprehensible." I felt nothing. Watching her being led away in handcuffs, not satisfaction, not vindication, just a hollow exhaustion, like I'd survived a war but lost something essential in the process. "The property is mine again," legally and practically. I had the locks changed, installed a security system, and Patricia helped me sage every room, a ritual that felt silly but somehow necessary to reclaim the space from Victoria's poison. Daniel has tried to rebuild our relationship. He moved out the day after Victoria's arrest, renting an apartment across town. He calls every Sunday, asking if he can visit, if I need anything, if I'll ever forgive him. I don't know the answer to that last question yet. Mom, I was manipulated, he said, during our last conversation. Victoria was a professional con artist. She knew exactly how to exploit my grief over Dad, my fear of losing you too. I'm not making excuses, but I need you to understand. I thought I was helping you. You locked me out during a storm, Daniel. I replied quietly. You watched her abuse me and called it love. You chose money over your mother. I know, he whispered. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make this right. Maybe he will. Maybe time will soften the edges of this betrayal. But right now, sitting in my reclaimed dwelling, I'm learning to be alone without being lonely, a distinction I never understood before. Patricia visits twice weekly. Marcus stops by for coffee every Saturday, and we've become unlikely friends. Dr. Morrison increased my volunteer hours at the church, saying I need purpose and community. She was right. I'm also writing this story, my testimony, my warning, my truth. Because Victoria wasn't unique. Elder abuse happens every day, in every community, perpetrated by people who smile and call you mom while plotting your destruction. If you're watching this and something feels wrong in your own life, if someone is isolating you, controlling you, making you doubt your own mind, trust your instincts. Reach out. Tell someone. Don't wait until you're locked outside in a storm, literally or metaphorically. And if you're someone like Daniel, someone who loves an elder but finds yourself listening to a spouse or partner who's encouraging you to take control for their own good, stop. Ask yourself whose good you're really serving. Talk to your parent directly, privately. Involve neutral third parties. Don't let love be twisted into a weapon. I'm 79 now. Wait. No, I'm 68. Still getting used to not being the confused old woman Victoria tried to make me believe I was. I'm 68, healthy, sharp, and angry. But I'm also healing. The property feels like mine again. The garden is blooming. I've been planting new roses, different varieties than the ones Thomas chose, because this is a different chapter. The kitchen smells like my grandmother's recipes, instead of Victoria's expensive perfume. The study is mine now, filled with my books, my photographs, my memories. I'm reclaiming my life one day at a time. And to everyone who's stayed with me through this entire story, who's listened to my pain and witnessed my survival, thank you. Your presence here means I'm not alone, that my voice matters, that what happened to me won't be forgotten or dismissed. If my story touched you, if it made you think about your own family dynamics, or inspired you to check on an elderly loved one, then something good came from this nightmare. Hit that like button if you believe justice matters. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like mine, stories of survival, of reclaiming power, of refusing to be erased. And please, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know my truth reached you, wherever you are in this world. Because that's how we fight back against people like Victoria, by refusing to stay silent, by sharing our stories, by standing together. I'm Margaret Eleanor Thornhill. I survived. And I'm finally, truly free.